Welcome to the After Codes podcast.
Subscribe now!
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of After Codes podcast. I'm Theo. I'm joined by Michael.
Hello.
And Carlo.
Hello.
As always. And today we have a very special guest with us. That is Robin Jenkins.
Hi there.
Thank you so much, Robin, for coming today. First, to kick it off, would you like to introduce yourself and explain who you are and your life?
Sure. So I'm Robin. I'm AC alumni. I was a student here in 1990 to 92. And for many years I studied in London. I studied as an architect. I trained as an architect and then worked as an architect and then taught as an architect. But for the last nearly 10 years, I've been involved with a project which is called Atlantic Pacific, which is a search and rescue organization with a simple ambition, which is to reduce the number of people drowning on our planet.
Cool. So a little icebreaker before we delve more into, who you are and what you've done. And that is, Robin, if you could time travel to any point in time, what year would that be and why?
Well, that's a good question. I actually think it would be the time that I was in Atlantic College. I mean, I've had a very, very fortunate life. Have come from a very privileged background, really, and so I've had like a fairly easygoing life, and I've had the great fortune of being able to choose and pick what I want to do. I was very lucky in my life before I came to Atlantic College. I lived in for a little while in a beautiful city called Bath, which is here in the UK, and I went to a school there and had lots of really good friends. I still go back there. And then I was really lucky to come here to Atlantic College, and I came here when there was quite a lot of things on offer. And while I was here, there was a lifeboat station here, which I was heavily involved with. But I also spent a lot of time having a lot of fun. And I think I miss those days, and I think back on them. And I'm very fortunate to still be friends with the people that I was a student with here in Atlantic College that many years ago.
So you wouldn't go forward in time to like the year 2100?
Oof, I don't know. Going forward in time is always a little bit scary because we are time traveling, but we're only moving in one direction.
That's true.
As you get older, those years get quicker, and to accelerate any of that. I mean, I don't know. I'm optimistic about the future. I'm really, really optimistic about the future. You have to be, I think. I think your generation are the people that are gonna steward change and bring about differences that this world really desperately needs at the moment.
Okay. And now we'll get into our signature sector of this podcast, which is called 9 Quick Questions. So we'll just ask you one by one, and you just answer in a sentence or less.
Sure.
Okay, so let me start off. So what do you think is your biggest strength?
Convincing other people to do things.
Cool. Biggest weakness?
Not doing some of those things myself.
Favorite place you have ever been to?
The Slipway at Atlantic College.
Okay. Favorite food?
Japanese.
Favorite sport?
It's a toss-up between Formula 1 and rugby.
All right.
Favorite movie?
Mon Oncle by Jacques Tati.
Okay. Favorite book?
Favorite book is probably The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
What is one thing you think is overrated?
Social media.
What do you think is one thing that is underrated?
Conversation.
Well, those were some pretty good answers. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know the movie and the book, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it sounded a bit French, so...
Yeah, Mon Oncle's a French film by... it's quite an old film. It's from the 60s.
Okay.
So even before my time. It's by a very famous French director called Jacques Tati.
Okay.
So now we'll basically try to walk through your life, like from your childhood up until now. And so, I think let's start. So where'd you grow up specifically?
Well, I grew up here in Atlantic College, so I was born here. My parents taught here,
Okay.
so I was lucky enough to be born on the camp. Well, I was born in Cardiff in the hospital there, but I grew up here.
You became a student in the school that your parents were working at as well. So how was that? How was life? as
So
a
I mean,
student?
Atlantic College, the campus is an incredible place. It's we're lucky enough to be located in a sort of, it's like a fairy tale. It was. I mean, I'm not sure how much you know about the history of the college, but the previous owner to Atlantic College was an extremely wealthy media tycoon who built this. Well, the castle was already here, but then he adapted it and changed the campus quite a lot. I think if he were doing it in this day and age, he would be spending the equivalent of, £200 or £300 million on the development of what has happened. That was what he spent back in the 40s and 50s. So the campus is an incredible place to grow up in, and even as a kid, I never took it for granted. It wasn't one of those things that I just was unaware of. I knew that I was in this incredible place with a swimming pool that I could use whenever I wanted to, a castle to explore, woodlands, swings, etc. That was a very charmed upbringing that I had here. Yeah.
Do you think that already being familiar with the environment, do you think that in any way helped you, of course, settle in and also like navigate life as a student? 'Cause
Yeah.
in a way you were already...
So I mean, it's when I first started here, like my father had a 3 years sabbatical. When just before I started as a student, so he actually worked for the International Baccalaureate exam.
Yeah.
Who used to be based in Bath, but they were moving from Bath to Cardiff as their kind of European HQ, and he was employed by the IB to kind of manage that whole transition and manage the exams as it was going through that. So I was very lucky. I lived in Bath, so I had a bit of a change of pace and a bit of a change of environment. And Bath is a city. I grew up around here, which is a country. So it was really nice to experience a city. And a city like Bath is pretty small and it's easy to get around, and it's a really beautiful place. Actually, when I came back, the same year that I started as a student, my father started as the principal here.
Yeah.
Which I thought was going to be a nightmare. But I was really lucky. I used to get on with my father. Really, my father's no longer with us, but I used to really get on well with my father, and we had a kind of unspoken deal that we'd just stay out of each other's way. It was probably harder for him than it was for me because I wasn't an ideal student, and actually I thought, it was a strange transition coming from growing up here and knowing every single corner of this campus. I'd explored it as a child and I knew where everything was, and I had to be careful not to be overconfident with students who are coming from all around the world and have never seen anything like it. And I had to balance that kind of behavior a little bit because of course you want to show off, this is my home, I know where everything is, and then at the same time you want to be kind of accepting and stuff like that. And actually that's one of the experiences I had in Atlantic College, was that maturing. Because when I started, I was a cocky idiot, right? And by the time I left, I was less of a cocky idiot. It was still a cocky idiot, right? Just less.
I feel like some people would say like the same with other people in HC now. I feel like when I came, I was also very confident, and now when you move through the process, you get better with people and how you surround.
Confidence is a strange thing actually, because the confidence isn't. When people say they're really really confident, that's not necessarily a good thing. Actually, what you want to be is competent.
Yeah.
Right. You want to be good at things. Being confident, like if you're overly confident, that's when you're preparing for failure. Yeah.
And the fact that you grew up in the campus, did that make you want to come back for college, or how did that go?
I always wanted to come here as a student because when I grew up here, I saw the boats. So I grew up with the noise of the boats down at the city. We lived in the house when I was growing up, which I think Tom Partridge, pool house, which Tom Partridge lives in. So we lived in that house. So I could see the lifeboat station, and I just always wanted to be on the lifeboat. That was my driving force to come here. My older brother and my older sister both came here as well, and they had a fantastic time here. So it was just like, I really want to go there. I was very immature. I was young. I was very, very young. I was young in my year. And actually, for a long time, I wanted to stay with my friends in Bath because I had a really, really great bunch of friends there. But there's no way that my parents were going to leave me unattended anywhere. And so I came to Atlantic College with a mixture of feelings, a bit like, am I going to be able to keep up with the academic level of students here? Am I going to fit in? But actually, very soon after I started here, I really enjoyed it. And it was about the boats, and it was about that sort of activity and going to sea and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, like, maybe a bit of an interesting story, maybe you have to tell now. So what was your most crazy story as a student, if you have one that you want to share?
Oof. I mean, it was very different times than it is now.
It's a good starting
but
point.
I think some of the craziest things, like that when I'm telling people about my experience of when I was a student here in Atlantic College, and I tell them that I was part of a lifeboat crew.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
That it's cool, but it's also like, what?
Yeah.
You know, people go, you did what? How old are you? And I was like, well, 16, 17, you know, and you're being trusted with the responsibility to go and rescue people.
Yeah,
you know, and things.
that's crazy.
So that side of things is a crazy thing. I think, you know, like any teenagers, I know that you guys, like when the teachers aren't looking and so on, and when your house parents aren't looking, you know, you're kind of, and I think they probably know more than you think, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think you know, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun when I was in AC, and I think, you know, there was quite a lot of mischief involved. Right? There was no malice, and there was no like illegal necessarily. But
So just what you do when you're 16 or 17.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
and I mean, like, I don't think you can do it now, but like when we were students here, there was access onto the. Certainly not condoned access, but there was access up onto the castle roof. You could get onto it fairly easily. And we used to play a thing which was to do a circumnavigate of the entire castle roof. Right, so you come out of the history department window. I shouldn't be telling you this. You come out of the history class window, which you can't open anymore, I don't think. Right, and you come out and you have to. It's pretty scary, and there are some points where you could definitely fall to your death. Right, and then you track over the kind of side to where the Lady Anne Tower is, and you have to clamber down there, and then you go across the Basingstoke roof, then you clamber down there, and you have to leap across a thing, and then you walk along one part of the wall, and then you have to climb up.
That sounds like a crazy challenge.
It sounds fun.
It was a big thing when I was here, and then I don't think the management of the college were so worried about us. They were worried about the damage we were doing to the castle.
Yeah.
So they didn't care about us.
So back to the your most crazy story, the lifeboat. I mean, how do you? Because when I came here, my mom also said that she heard from previous alumni, because when she was in Singapore before, and she had a friend that had gone to AC, and she told her all about the lifeboats. And how is it like for you now? Because obviously it's not a thing anymore. How do you feel about that? Because it's a great thing. It was a great thing.
It was a great thing, but it's a really interesting thing too, right? So how did the lifeboat station start here? It started due to a set of circumstances, right? So the first headmaster here, Desmond Hoare, was a very keen sailor, and he believed that putting young people on sailing boats was an express way to get to international understanding, right? So put two people from an opposing nation on a boat and tell them sail in the Bristol Channel, right? They can either argue, right, and that will end in catastrophe,
or they can sail,
or they can work together and they sail, right? And it's a really good, quick, simple metaphor for how you can solve a problem. So sailing boats were out in the water within the first year of the gates opening for Atlantic College in 1962, right? So there was a bunch of knackered old boats that they gathered and collected and bought secondhand from around the place, and they put students out in the Bristol Channel, which, no joke, is one of the most dangerous pieces of water in the world, right? Yeah. So they put them out there, and then after a while they realize, even when they're working together, they may not sail, right? so
take some skill.
Yeah. So then they decided, okay, let's put some safety boats on the water. So they put some inflatable boats on the water with some engines on them. Yeah. Those were great, but then as soon as it was rough, you get this problem with the bottom of the hull. If they were soft, they stick to the surface of the water, and they would do this. So they were like, okay, how do we overcome this? Yeah. Right. And they set it as a challenge to the students. Right, so the students were like, okay, if we make it stiff, if we make it rigid, that would probably make it better. And Desmond Hoare said, try it. And actually the story goes that this castle came with like furniture. Right?
Yeah.
So
You took it apart.
yeah, well, basically there was a table, and the headmaster, Desmond Hall, said, you know, I tell you what, if you need a piece of wood big enough to fit the tubes, there's a table up in the castle. You can have it. Turns out this table was extremely valuable, and anyway, so they cut round the shape of the tube and just glued it to the bottom of this this inflatable tube. Went out to sea, and then they suddenly had a high performance boat. Right, it was really, really quick.
Yeah, of course.
But as soon as it got rough, that flat hull would come out of the water and either get caught by the wind on that side, right, or it would slap the surface of the water like this, right? So super uncomfortable, super dangerous. Right, so it was a student with the support of Desmond Hall who just said, maybe we just need to put a V in it. Most boats have got a V in it, and that will stop it from slapping. So they just took that same piece of wood, they cut it down the middle, made it into a V, stuck the tubes on, put it out in the water, and they're like, bingo, right? We've got this amazing boat.
Yeah.
The RNLI at the time, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, who are the search and rescue organisation that cover the UK, who are 200 years old this year, really well-established, traditional organisation run by volunteers, tons of money, a huge development department, heard about this boat, came and had a look at it, and then there was this long partnership where they were sort of in development together. And in 1971, Atlantic College sold the patent because they took out a patent. They were smart enough to take out a patent for the rigid hull inflatable boat. They sold the patent to the RNLI for £1.
Yeah, it's probably way a lot more worth today.
It was a lot more worth it then, right? So basically, but as Kurt Hahn said, and as Desmond Hall said, this is a gift. Right? The transaction is just so that we've got a piece of paperwork. This is a gift to humanity, right? And my God, it is an incredible gift to humanity because the rigid hull inflatable boat now is the most successful search and rescue sea platform in the world and has been for some time. In return, the RNLI developed the boat further and located one here at the college. Right? And it was manned by students. And it was back in a different time when risk registers and health and safety were different. That's not to say it was gung-ho. Right? So Desmond Hall wrote a manual, which is called an SOP, right? Which means a standard operating procedure. And I've read it, and it's no joke. You almost if you made a mistake, I mean, you would get, first of all, a bollocking from him, right? And you'd get removed from the crew, right? By the time I was there, the RNLI were well established with us then, and there was a much clearer sort of mechanism of how things worked. And actually what would happen is that at the beginning of the year, the RNLI would come and inspect, and they would select, with the staff of the college, 5 or 6 students to be the crew of the lifeboat.
How many students?
So there are 48, so across 2 years, right?
And how many tried out?
So all of them, 24 students per year would want to be crew of the lifeboat.
Wow.
Right?
So it was probably a major honor to be on that lifeboat.
So it was a big deal, right? So we'd have August period. We used to have a period of term that took place in August, and you would come in that term and you would specialize in your service. So there was the lifeboat, there was the cliff rescue, there were the beach rescue, there was social service, there was extramural.
So cool.
And you'd spend the whole month you'd have just come back as second years, and you'd spend it alone just as second years, and you'd be training with your service. And at the end of that, then you would get sort of positioned within the service. The RNLI would then select 5 students, and they would be the registered crew of the lifeboat. But the relationship and the deal that they had with Atlantic College was that even if they're not registered, they can still go out on the lifeboat, right? If you deem them fit to go. Right, so everybody as a second year was allowed to be call-out crew, and you would sign up and you would be on call-out duty. So if you were it was inshore lifeboats. It was called ILBs. If you were an ILB Keenie, right, those were the geeks that spent too much time down at the seafront, and the nickname for them was an ILB Keenie, and I was one of those. Right? And an ILB Keenie might put themselves down 4 days a week for call. And there was a piece of paper, and you'd go and sign up your name, and you'd be on duty. And the way in which the boat was activated was that the Coast Guard would call the college. There was a telephone just outside the Great Hall on the wall, a bright red telephone that was super loud. It was called the klaxon. Someone would answer it, and it would be the Coast Guard, and they'd say, we need you to launch the lifeboat, or you need you to launch the beach rescue crew, or the thing. And there was a red button on the wall, and you'd hit it, and a siren would go off, and everyone would run down to the seafront.
Wow.
Like mid-class.
Mid-class, middle of the night, didn't matter, right? And you'd launch the boat, but anyone could go on it, and the staff would just select the crew, even if you were signed up. So I wasn't registered first time, right? So they did some re-registering in the year, and I wasn't registered first time.
Did you get it?
I went on every call out when I was
Okay.
here, right? So 6 call outs when I was here, and I went on every single one. And the reason being is the staff member would throw me they'd stand there with a life jacket. You'd run down there. He'd already be there with the life jackets on his arm, and he'd pass them to the crew. And he'd be looking for me to throw one to me, not because I was some shit hot lifeboater, but because he knew that if anything went wrong, my father was unlikely to sue the college. So, but ultimately,
There was some underage nepotism.
yeah. So what happened eventually, though, was that by the time we got to 2013, when the lifeboat had left, and I came back, so I stayed involved with lifeboats. I was crew with a lifeboat with the Tower Lifeboat on the River Thames in London, and I'd been there for quite some time. And in my holidays, I used to come back and I used to fill in for when the students were away here. But by the time in 2013, I was training the crew down here. So I'd come down for August period and train the crew. But by that time, the RNLI had already said that they were pulling out. And we argued with the RNLI. Like, we wrote letters to them. I spoke to their CEO and I said, how can you do that with the history of this boat and everything? And they were just like, that's not how we make a decision. It's about viability and feasibility of this boat actually remaining here. The Atlantic class boat was a 21-foot boat when I was a student here, which is 6.5 meters. Already 5 years after I left,
bigger.
it was bigger, 7.5 meters. They are replacing them all with 8.5 meters, and have done that now for all of them, and it would have meant huge changes to the seafront. They'd have had to widen the seaway, open the gap in the wall, build
course.
more of the thing. It was going to cost £3 million.
Yeah.
And we're getting less and less call-outs because people are safer at sea. And the RNLI have this issue now.
Yeah.
It's 240 stations around the UK, and a lot of them are just on standby because people just know and more aware and so on. And people don't get into the same level of trouble. And the issue here was that they had this lifeboat there, and when the last crew I trained, the RNLI, just because of safety measures, they would select 5 in the year, and that was it. And no other student would get a look in. Right? So the whole year, all the other students who were training on the other boats, they would not only were they not allowed to go out on call-outs on the lifeboat, they weren't even allowed out on the boat at all. So in the station was this state-of-the-art lifeboat, and outside were all the training boats, and only 5 college students were able to go out on that boat. So actually, even though we argued and everything like that, its time was done.
Yeah.
Right? It became this exclusive thing, right?
That wasn't the purpose behind it that you lived through.
It completed its purpose.
Yeah.
Any charity wants to put themselves out of business. That's an objective of a charity, right? Is to have solved the problem so they no longer need to be there.
Yeah.
You know, so our charity, Atlantic Pacific, wants to end drowning, right? If I could click my fingers and end global drowning now, I would. Effectively, that would put me out of business.
Yeah.
But that's the point of a charity. So actually, it gone full circle. And there was no boat development going on at the seafront anymore. There were no new ribs or anything. We were just building the same old boat over and over and over again. So actually, them leaving gave us the opportunity to start something new. It come full circle. It achieved its goal.
Yeah.
And it got there. So let's start doing something new. And with that's why we started Atlantic Pacific, was to fill that void. We still want the traditions of going to sea at Atlantic College.
Yeah.
But actually, we want to do something broader than working just in the UK, right? So the RNLI is just a UK-based organisation, and it's great that we can serve our community here, but actually there are communities around the world who need much, much more than ours.
And backtracking a little bit before AP and its creation, we wanted to touch a little bit upon, well, your life after being a student here at AC. We know that you went on to study architecture in London, right? Well, I mean, how was that, and what drew you?
Why architecture?
I'd always been interested in architecture. I'd always liked design, And there was a school in London called the Architectural Association, which I had the catalogue from, because actually my brother also went to study architecture. In the end, he decided he didn't like it and changed course. But he had the prospectus for the school, and this prospectus for the school just looked so cool. And they didn't select people on grades. That was another. They selected people on interview. So
that's a good.
Wait,
that's a
yeah,
good
so
way
your
of
IB wasn't the best?
yeah, well, let's not talk about it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I mean, clearly, while at AC, your focus was on the lifeboats.
It was not only on the lifeboats. I was a very keen. I really loved doing that. You know, I could have been better actually. You know, like I was very drawn to the social aspect in Atlantic College.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
hard not to be drawn for everything here.
Yeah,
is based on social.
and I also have no regrets about it. I mean, I have regrets that I didn't try harder in things. You know, it's like I don't speak another language. When I was here, I was learning Italian.
Yeah.
We did have 3 different teachers, and I was in a class with people that could speak were Spanish. You know, so it's like doing. We used to be called. It used to be called hires and subsids. So now they're hires and standards. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so like, you know, I did Italian standard, and it was learning a new language, and pretty much everyone in the class was either like Mexican or Spanish or Argentinian and stuff like that. And so they're going, this is just like the word I know, and I'm sitting there going, what? But I also was pretty immature, and I really regret not doing some of those things, like focusing on some of those things. And I'd love to be able to speak Italian. It's never too late, but you know, you know.
And just while we're at AC, I want to have a little of a follow-up question on the question you answered previously, when you said that like a lot of things like the RNLI disappeared, obviously, and also I guess in the beach rescue and those things also disappeared around that time. Do you think if those things were still here, like the college would be a different place, and maybe issues that we face now wouldn't be a thing? Because, for example, I don't know, I always have that theory, like when there's a lot of like, for example, like sports competitions or things what people are passionate about, other things like go out of focus. I mean, it's not on. It's obvious that we obviously have a drinking problem at the school. Do you think that those kind of things would put that in the background?
I don't know, right? Like it's easy to look at the past and go, those were the best days.
Yeah.
Right. And sure, it was great when I was a student here in Atlantic College. There was you felt like you were part of a mission, right?
Yeah.
You felt like you were part of a cause. You felt like you were involved in a movement for better social justice, for responsibility, etc., etc. And as you get further away from the time that you were there, you forget the bad things. Funny enough, unless they were really, really traumatic. But you forget about the kind of things that didn't work so well, right? You take away from it, like, and actually I think one of the most important things here in Atlantic College is friendship. Yeah. And the friendships that you make here, and you seeing across the border, and it's like, where are you from? You know, where are you from? Where are you from? And that they soon don't become an important thing, actually. Your nationality is just an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more than that. And I think that still exists here. And I think the college went through a hard period, right, where law and regulations start to change. Yeah. The college goes through a hard time when the government changes, right? Yeah. So all of these things affect the way we're here. But I think if I were to kind of say what was the most important thing I did in Atlantic College, right, I can connect it to my experience of the lifeboat. I can connect it to the fact that I had a multicultural dormitory on all of these things. But I would say that one of the things that I found really, really powerful, and one of the things that really armed me moving forward when I went to university, and indeed in my current life, is the mode of responsibility, and taking responsibility and having a profound awareness for others. Your actions affect other people. And for sure, I've been an antisocial nuisance in my life, you know. But when I'm being an antisocial nuisance, I know it. Right? And I think that one of the problems in the world at the moment is, or any time, it's not just the moment. I think any time is that there are a lot of people who are unaware of the fact that they're being a nuisance. They're unaware of the fact that they're being antisocial.
Yeah.
They are indifferent, or they don't care. And I think one of the things that Atlantic College taught me then, and I think it still has now, is that kind of understanding that, you know, we all have a part to play and we all have a responsibility. And that's a big thing. And I think it doesn't matter how it's taught to you, right? Whether it's taught by operating and manning a lifeboat station is an express way to get to that position, right? Of course it is. But it can be done in many ways.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
Fair enough. Okay, so I think let's get back to the uni stuff. So you studied architecture, so you wanted to do that before going to AC. Did you have the intent, like, I'm going to study these subjects and architecture? No.
I was very uncertain, to be honest with you, what I wanted to do. I wanted to do lots of things, you know, actually. And if you'd asked me when I was 10 years old what I wanted to be a car mechanic, you know. Then if you'd asked me when I was 12 years old, I wanted to be an actor. When you asked me 15, I didn't know. I was very immature. And I came to Atlantic College also not knowing what I wanted to do. But when I came down to the crunch, it was like architecture kept on coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And how was that experience? I know we did some research, and you after that went on and did some work with some high-end fashion brands. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, how was that, like, that experience? You were quite young at the time.
Sure.
And, well, you were in the city, like...
Yeah, London and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a change in pace in life. And the school I went to took no prisoners. So it was a very, very, very tough learning environment. Architecture is a pretty demanding subject. And the university that I was, the school that I was at, the architecture is a very old school of architecture. It's actually the oldest architecture school in the UK. And it's a cutthroat environment. And if you didn't deliver, they would just kick you out. Mm-hmm. There was no first, second, third warnings. It was like, you're out. And so people would just disappear, right? They would go in and see their tutor for a tutorial, and then the tutor would say, you haven't done enough work, you're out.
Wow.
And so it changed to way in which I went from being sort of a little bit lackadaisical and, gung-ho about my studies to working extremely hard. And I learned how to work, and that's what that school did for me. It was quite different than somewhere like Atlantic College, where you're outward looking. There you're inward looking. You're looking to better yourself. And I had problems with that when I was a student there. And when I look back on it, I think it scarred me as an institution because it was so demanding and we worked really hard. That doesn't mean that we also didn't have fun, and I made some great friends there, but it destroyed my relationship with architecture in a way.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in a good way, right? Because actually, I don't think I was cut out to be an architect, And actually, when I started working as an architect, I didn't find it an enjoyable experience, and I loved living in London. That was really, really I'd always loved going to London as a kid. It was always really exciting. I loved living in this massive city.
I mean, you're based there now, kind of.
I'm based half time here. Okay. Well, I'm more time down in Lantwick. I live in Lantwick Major, but I'm in London like at least once a week or once every 2 weeks. Now I don't miss London. I loved it when I was younger. I loved it when I was there, but London now, I would go there and it's like you get off the train in Paddington and you might as well cut a hole in the bottom of your pocket, the amount of money that's coming out of you. And I don't miss the kind of spending hours of your time sitting on a stinking metro tube and all those things. I love the culture of the city. I was very lucky to spend.
And how was living the Thames?
So I didn't live on the Thames. I lived on the Regent's Canal. So I lived on a narrowboat on the Regent's Canal.
Okay, so it's not technically.
But it was a houseboat?
Yeah, it was a houseboat. So the canal runs parallel with the river. It's a little bit more. The River Thames is a ferocious piece of water. It's very hard to live on there.
It's not that
People
nice.
do.
Okay.
But the canal I lived in King's Cross. I lived on a narrowboat for nearly. Well, how long did I live in it for? A long time, 16 years, 17 years, or something like that.
Wow.
Well, being a lifeguard.
So I was a volunteer with the RNLI there, so I do 12-hour shifts a month with a lifeboat, and you have to actually stay on the station.
Yeah.
But
while you worked as an architect, or was that afterwards?
So while I was working as an architect, and then when I finished working as an architect, I started teaching I taught architecture for many years. Yeah. So I graduated from architecture school in when did I leave Atlanta? 92. So I graduated in 99. Mm-hmm. It's a long old course, architecture. And then I took the first. It was a recession at the time, and jobs were scarce. Mm-hmm. So I took the first job that came my way, which was a very strange job. So I was a project managing architect for a company called Club 21, who owned the Giorgio Armani franchise in the UK. So my job was to manage Giorgio Armani shops.
That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Fits. It sounds cool. It was the most unpleasant job I've ever done in my entire life.
So many changes, or so many particular ways you had to do something? Or?
Well, like I had a really nice boss. Who was a guy called Marco, who was an ex-student from Atlantic College, funny enough.
Really? Okay.
A few years ahead of me.
Does that help? Do you feel like, is there like a connection, even though like you
Yeah,
weren't?
we definitely had a connection.
Yeah.
Super nice guy, really nice guy. He still works for the mother company, which is, it's really boring, but there's the overarching company is a company called Como Holdings, who own hotels, their luxury brands or whatever, and he's their chief architect.
All right.
Wow.
And they needed somebody to manage the like concession shops. So if you go into a big department store like Harrods or Harvey Nichols or Selfridges or whatever, they'll have inside there, they'll have a concession, right? So they'll have an Armani shop in there. And at the time when I started, there were 120 Armani concessions across the UK, and my job was to manage the shop fits. So I was the project managing architect of that. I wouldn't design them. They would get designed in Italy, and then I would translate the Italian design into something that UK contractors could do.
Oh, okay.
And then I would manage the contractors. So I would do all of that kind of stuff, and then I would manage the shops after they were installed. So I'd do all the maintenance on them and stuff like that.
Okay.
Do you have any favorite architects?
My favorite architect is Mies van der Rohe, who long dead, but German architect who built, amongst many things, like the Berlin Museum of Modern Art, which is an incredible building. He built it's a beautiful building. And my favorite building, which is the German Pavilion in Barcelona. Yeah. Which is
Carl's very smart right now.
He built many things, and actually, funny enough, this guy Marco Savini, who was my boss, who was ex-AC student, we discovered that it's also his favorite architect as well. Right. So like all the time we would go, we just need to make it look like Mies van der Rohe.
Wait, is that the U building in Barcelona, the one you mentioned?
Sorry,
what's the name of the?
It's the German Pavilion in Barcelona. So there was the World Fair in Barcelona in the 50s or something.
It's a minimalist building with like the flat.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
I have
right.
a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
cool building.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay, so how did you then go from that to AP? Like, how did that work?
So it's a long story. Yeah, I mean, so I worked for Armani for 3 years, and I hated it. Mm-hmm. I really liked my boss. My boss, I mean, he was actually my manager. My boss was the guy who was the MD of the company. And he was, quite frankly, one of the most unpleasant people I've ever come across in my life.
He wasn't from AC.
He wasn't from AC. And it was, it sounds like it's going to be glamorous and fun, right? But it's not at all. Mm-hmm. You're working in a really boring environment with people who are just fixated on clothing and status and money. And that was very apparent. and I had enough, and then left, and I went freelance for a little while, and I got a nice gig doing some work for Paul Smith, who's another fashion designer. And it was a really nice sort of halcyon experience where I was flown to New York to design their showrooms in New York.
Wow.
And I thought, this is going to be my life moving forward, is going to be doing things for clients like Paul Smith and stuff like this, doing cool projects in New York. And that was really, really great. And so I did that, and I thought, this is great. Came back and then waited and waited for the next job to come along, and then I realized you can't wait. You've got to go and look for them. So then I got a job working for a small architectural firm, again in fashion, doing Manolo Blahnik shops. And you probably haven't heard of Manolo Blahnik, but Manolo Blahnik is the most expensive shoes that you can buy in the world, pretty much.
What?
High heels
okay.
for women. They do make men's shoes, but mainly women. And that was hell.
How much is a pair?
They're like £4,000 a pair or something, like £5,000 a pair.
Jesus
You could pay more. I think there was a pair that was like £25,000. But I think you can, it's like these stupid things.
Yeah, that's unnecessary.
And it was just such a hideous environment. And I actually walked out of that job without giving notice. I just went, no, I've had enough of this, and walked out. And then I had to deal with the reality that like I need to get a job. So I worked as a barman for a while, which was quite good fun.
Where in London?
Yeah,
Okay.
I worked in just
Was
around
it
the
very
corner.
easy, or like becoming a barman? Did you have like a course or anything?
No, you don't. You just walk in. They put a sign up in the window. We need bar staff now, and you go in and you go. You still looking? Yes. You start now. That's how it happens.
Crazy.
Okay.
It's harder than I thought it was
No,
going to
because
be.
I mean, you have to remember so many drinks, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
and we did cocktails as
Yeah,
well.
so
anyone who had a cocktail from me in Babushka pub in during the early noughties in London, or mid noughties in London, I apologise, because I was just making it up as I was going along. I was no way I was going to remember any of these things. So if you just go, yeah, that looks good, that looks good, like that, shake it, and you'd see them sipping it, going,
hopefully the right color.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'd be asking the other stuff. What colour is a Long Island iced tea? Yeah. So and it was quite good fun working in a bar, because you have very little responsibility really. And it's social, and you get it, whatever, but it's exhausting and harder than I ever thought it was going to be. I mean, it's the most physically exhausting job I've ever done.
Really? That was quite a hectic, career path, because you kind of got trapped in this fashion world without really wanting it.
yeah. And I mean, it was a bit the times, so a lot of my friends that I'd studied architecture with, struggled for years without getting work. Yeah. And architecture is a brutal environment. Lots of employers won't pay you, right? It's like they'll take you on board like as a kind of an intern, and they won't pay you. And in fact, there are some architects who will charge you, right, to work with them. Yeah, because it's considered as there's some high-end architects, who are like kind of celebrity name architects, and everyone wants to work for them. So they've worked out, this is great, we can make money off our employees, right? So it's brutal. It's really, really horrible.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the leap into AP was, the leap from that was like, I was working in a bar, and it was a bit sort of a loose end, really. I was like, all the money that I'd actually saved up working in Armani, which was not great money, but it was okay, and that was keeping me alive and what have you, was beginning to dwindle, and a bar doesn't pay you very well. And I was panicked. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And it was quite a scary period of my life. And I just got lucky, really. I was invited to go and it was one of these moments in life. If there's a tip that I can give you now, check your junk mail. I was deleting my junk mail, and there was an email in there from a guy called Fernando Rill, who was a Brazilian guy who was a course director in Chelsea College of Art and Design. And he had been given my email address by a friend of mine, and this friend of mine said, this guy had said, we're looking for teachers, man. We're looking for lecturers to come on the course. Our course hasn't got enough staff on it. Do you know of anyone who's good? And my friend said, really kindly said, you need to reach out to this guy. Robin. Yeah, and so he emailed me, and it went into my junk mail. And I was cleaning out my junk mail, and I saw this thing, and He said, if you could let me know by Friday, and in a date, like Friday the 10th or something like that. And I just looked at my calendar, and it was already like 10 days
passed
out. And it was actually it was the day before the computer was going to flush it. You know, how it automatically gets rid of it. So it was the day before like that. And I was like that. And it was like, oh, I've been given your name. Are you interested? And I just thought, okay, I probably missed this. I'm probably not going to get it. So I just emailed him straight away. And I said, I'm so sorry I haven't heard from you. This was in my junk mail. Are you still looking? Here's my telephone number. 5 minutes later, he phoned me back and he goes, are you still free? And I was like, yes, I am. And he goes, can you come tomorrow? And I was like, yep, sure. And he goes, okay, we just need what's called an associate lecturer. Yeah. Right? So that's like 1 day a week I was going to go. So I was like, great. I've missed out a huge chunk here. In that, I also, I never wanted to be a teacher. Both my parents were teachers. My grandparents are in education, blah, 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 blah. And I always wanted to do something different. Mm-hmm. But a girlfriend of mine at the time, who was training to be a teacher, convinced me that I would make a good teacher. And so I signed up for a teaching agency with no qualifications, right? So went along and I said, I don't have any qualifications. I want to get into teaching. And that's one of the ways you get into teaching is you work as a agency temp, right? And then you learn the process and then you go and study teaching. Mm-hmm. And so I went and worked. I signed up for this agency and they said, when can you start? And I said, I can start immediately. And they sent me to the following day, they sent me to a school in South London, which was a special needs school, which was an incredible place that was a dumping ground for kids they didn't know what to do with in the area. And I went into this school. It was at some distance away from where I lived. I went into the school not knowing what I went to. And it was like a hurricane was going through this building with these kids. And I went in and all the staff were completely fried and whatever. And I was just told, you're going to work with this kid today. I was like, okay, I need to know. No, you work with him. So they just put me in this classroom with this kid. They didn't give me any instructions, nothing, whatever. I sat down next to this kid who turned and looked at me and said, what are you looking at, man? And I said, I'm going to be working with you today. And he went, F you bumberclot.
And you were like, great
and
job.
I was like, great. And he said, I'm going to come round to your house and I'm going to stab your mother in the, and I can't repeat the word.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was like, right, okay, great. Do you know where my mother lives? And he went, what? And I went, do you know where my mother lives? And he was like that. And I said, well, you're going to have a hard time doing what you just said you do if you don't know where my mother lives. And have you ever met my father? Is what I said. And that kid and I ended up becoming great friends. So, worked in that school for 5 years, on and off, sort of like going down a few days a week. And it opened my mind to another world. This was a very impoverished part of London, where kids had experienced some things that you cannot believe. These were the kids, a lot of them were like the kids of drug addicts or alcoholics and stuff like that. And, there's nothing wrong with their intelligence. There was just something wrong with their opportunity and what they had been, the potential of what they could and couldn't do with their lives was very apparent. And this was a section of society that had just basically been neglected. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of fun working there. And there were a couple of other young guys working there at the same time who were really visionary people who realized that we could be doing something more with these kids than just sort of it was like a penitentiary. We were just holding them for the day. You couldn't really teach them because their behavior was so bad. And along with some of the staff in the school and with a headmaster who was just very generous and willing to allow us to experiment, we did some really cool things. So we made music with these kids, we made theater with these kids, we did design projects with these kids. We bought 3 years in a row, we bought 12 of them down here for a week and did canoeing and climbing with them and stuff like that. These are kids who've never left the city. So I did that for 5 years. And at the same time as that, then it was badly paid. Very, very badly paid. I was getting about £30 a day.
Wow.
To work there, right? So that's the life of a teacher, right? So the whole process of trying to get into teaching, you have to go these steps and you get badly paid. And And I couldn't sustain life on that money, so I had to find something a little bit better. And then what happened with the university happened. And I went from working 1 day in the university, 4 days in this school in South London, and that slowly the balance changed. And by the end of it, I was working 1 day a week in this school in South London and 4 days in London. And then I had to stay to the school in South London, which I felt very bad about because I really loved working there and it really needed people, but it was becoming unsustainable. And then my career in the university took off, and I went from being an associate lecturer, and then by the time I left, I was a senior lecturer, and I really loved it. It was a really, really brilliant career. It was really, really good fun. I learned a lot. I was surrounded by really interesting people. I developed a career as an artist. I started painting. I started filmmaking, and all the things that I'd loved doing when I was in university. Suddenly, I was in an environment where I could do that a lot. And learned some really cool new skills. I learned how to bronze cast and stuff like that. It was really, really, really great. And I put a lot of effort and time in. And as a result of that, the university were very kind to me, and they offered me this opportunity to go to Japan as part of a research project to help with the communities that have been affected by the tsunami and earthquake of 2011. So I went to a city called Kamaishi in 2014, and I was there for 5 weeks doing research with an organization in Japan called Future Lab Tohoku, and it was very unclear what we were meant to be doing. Meantime, the lifeboat was being pulled out of Atlantic College.
Okay.
I'm there with a community that's been very, very badly affected by
And
drowning.
you were just volunteering as a...
I was sent there by university.
Yeah.
And so I was still a volunteer in London as a lifeboat crew member, so I was still involved with the RNLI. I was still whatever, and I went there, and then suddenly this sort of eureka moment happened, where I was speaking to a woman who ran the hotel on the beach where we were staying, which had been the evacuation center during the tsunami, and she told me about the day of when they went looking for survivors on the beach. So after the wave, this was March 11th in northern Japan. That's winter. It was snowing.
So
it was
cold.
dark,
Being
freezing
there.
cold.
So cold.
And they went looking for survivors along the beach. They heard the cries for help from people floating out at sea on jetsam and debris, and there was nothing that they could do. So they just listened to the cries of help get quieter and quieter and quieter, and that's all they could do. So when we met them 3 years later, and I heard this story from this woman, Akiko, who ran the hotel and had been telling me that she did this thing, I asked the question, "Where's your lifeboats?" And they were like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Your lifeboats, where's your lifeboat service? In the UK, we have 240 lifeboat stations run by volunteers around the coastline. Surely you're an island nation, the fourth biggest economy in the world, seafaring history, sailors and fishermen. Surely you've got lifeboats." No. So I just assumed that maybe they just didn't know about it. Right? So then I started asking around, and it was like, "You don't have a lifeboat service? Whatever." No. So by the end of the trip, the end of the 5 weeks, this idea had started to emerge in my mind that maybe we could start a lifeboat service here. Meanwhile, Mish, who works here, he and I had been talking about what can we do now that the lifeboat's gone from here.
Were you guys classmates or how?
No. Mish wasn't a student here, but Sarah, his wife, and I grew up together.
Oh, okay.
And
really?
Sarah's brother went to AC with me, and sister. So Sarah's got a brother and sister who are twins, and they were in my year in Atlantic College. And Sarah's brother, whose nickname is Gambo, because Sarah's name is Sarah de Gama Howells, and that she was also called Gambo. Maybe I shouldn't be telling you that. They're both nicknamed Gambo.
I think she will say quite straight if she likes it or doesn't.
Yeah. So, So Graham, her brother, was nicknamed Gambo, who I grew up with, and Sarah was a couple of years older than me, and what have you. So I know Mish through her, and I knew Mish because Mish was involved with the lifeboat. He was crew on the lifeboat when it was here, and we both share a massive love for the sea and we're messing around with boats. And so, when I was in Japan, I just thought maybe we could do this. So I came back and I said to Mish, I said, "Look, I've got this idea. We build a lifeboat and we take it to Japan and we get the students here to do it." what do you reckon? And we'd already done some crazy things. We'd renovated the oldest rib in the world, which was built by students here in 1967. That's another story for another day, but we just renovated that, and we did a expedition on it where we drove from here 800 kilometers all the way around to East Sussex in this boat that had been built in 1967.
That's crazy. That's good.
And we were up for anything. And so I said, what do you reckon if we ask a bunch of students whether they'd be interested? So we had an assembly, like a Friday night lecture thing. So I told them about my experience in Japan. I said, who wants to help me build a boat? And just every hand in the room went up. And that's the beginning of Atlantic Pacific. So we built the boat here and we sent it there. Well, first of all, I went back to Japan in September. So this was in March. I went back and I proposed the idea to them. They were very confused. They had no idea what I was talking about. But when they eventually got it, one of the people at this meeting just said, yeah, it's great, it's great. Where will we keep it? I hadn't thought about that at all. And I just blurted out, I'm an architect, I'll design you a station. So I came back to the UK and I went to my boss in the university, the head of the college, a guy called Chris Wainwright, who was very supportive and had selected me to go there in the first place. And I said, hey man, Chris, I've done something really stupid. And he was like, what? And he said, you know, the lifeboat project? And he was like, yeah. And I said, okay, I've also said that I'm going to design them a lifeboat station. And he just looked at me and he said, Jesus, man. Like, the lifeboat was one thing, designing him a station. And I said, yeah, and I need support from the university to do it. And I said, but on the airplane on the way, I have all my good ideas on airplanes. On the airplane on the way back, I was sitting there just thinking, what have I done? I've just because when I said this, I'm an architect, I'll design you something. Everyone in the room went, great!
You gave a promise you had to keep.
Yeah, and it was a promise I had to keep. So I was sitting on an airplane like, what am I going to do? So I sat down and I had, you know, the bags that you puke in on planes, you know, the vomit bags. That's the only thing I had in front of me. And I just asked the stewardess for a ticket, for a pen, sorry. And I rough sketched out an idea on a container, and then when I got back to the university, I went straight from the airport to the university after a 13-hour long-haul flight.
Wow.
Went into the university, went into my boss's office. I said, listen, I've done something really stupid. I've done this thing, but it has to happen now. And his head in his hands, and he'd go, but I've got a good idea. And I just put it on the table.
What was it?
And it's a 40-foot shipping container.
Yeah.
Right. So I realized I can't design them a lifeboat station. Right. I haven't practiced as an architect for a long time. Japanese architectural regulation is totally different. It has to be earthquake proof, all these things. I'd have to get engineers and all of these things. This is going to take years if I make this happen with no money. Right. So, and this will be a burden on a community that is trying to rebuild. So if it's and so it's a 40-foot shipping container. That's 12 meters. It's a big one, like the white ones
Yeah,
in
but
the field, which are
containers
out.
are hard to mold. I mean, it's hard to
Don't need to
construct.
mold it, right? So
Yeah, that's
what
true.
it was
But isolated and all those things.
don't really need to even do that for a lifeboat. So it is the lifeboat station.
Yeah.
So
it's
I
just,
went back and I sketched out the idea that it has a boat here, it has a workshop here, and it has a changing room here.
Yeah.
That's all it needed, right? Turnkey solution. So I just said, I convinced my boss, can the university buy me a shipping container? And he was like, okay, go and find out how much they are. Well, at the time they were really cheap, and we bought one for £2,500.
Wow.
We had it delivered to the university, and I rounded up my students there. I took my sick bag and I gave it to the guy who was best at CAD drawing. And I said, take that, translate that into a CAD drawing for me, please. And so he drew it up really nicely in a CAD drawing. So we had a material list then and everything like that. And I went to the workshops in the university, and I went to the staff in the workshops, all the technicians there. And I said, I need your help. I need to line this shipping container with wood. I need to build all of these things. And it was a community project. We had, at one point, there was about 20 of us working. We did it in 2 weeks.
Wow,
The boat was being built down here. And we brought the boat up to London. We stuck it in the back of the container. We stuck it on a ship in Southampton, and we met it in Tokyo 8 weeks later. Wow. And then we put it on a truck in Tokyo, and we drove it up to the north. And then we brought 5 AC students with us. Yeah. But while this was going on, we'd also sent a boat to Lesvos in the Greek islands. So we had a boat already here, and we took that to Lesvos, and we trained a group of lifeguards in Lesvos how to use it in the refugee crisis. And that's actually the real, that's the genesis moment for Atlantic Pacific, because the lifeboat station in Japan was just going to be one project. We had no ambitions on taking it further. I didn't want to lose my job. I wanted to stay at the university. But when I went to Lesvos for the first time and I saw the scale of the disaster there, and I saw how many people, young people, were there to try and make a difference, were there to try and help. There were so many volunteers, there were thousands of people. It felt like a UWC environment, right, where everyone's just 5 years older, or even less. In some people, they were like 18-year-old, but with no skill.
Yeah.
Right?
So hard, yeah.
No ability, right? Where you get training to work in search and rescue. Now, those people, despite their best intentions and best wills, end up getting in the way, right? So when I first arrived there, and that was in 2015-16.
This might sound like a stupid question, but where was the funding coming for this? Like,
Begging and borrowing and stealing. We were asking people basically to give us bits of money here, bits of money there. There wasn't that much, actually. We had a boat already. Like, the project for Japan was funded. The university paid for that.
Oh,
the university was very wealthy. Right. Plus, there was a partner in Japan that was paying. But everything we've done after that has been just...
Is that still a big challenge for you?
Oh yeah, it's the biggest challenge. We could, we have no shortage of ideas. We have no shortage of willing people and stuff. That we just have a shortage of money.
And like how, like looking in the future now, how do you think that will develop? Do you think people will like still give more or like give less, or
it depends? Well, you know, we're living in a very, very, very tough period of time, right? There's a cost of living crisis. It's not just here; it's global,
it's everywhere in the world,
right? So there isn't money around, right? No. And we've been spending money on the wrong things, right? We've been wasting money.
Yeah.
The mission of somewhere like UWC is never been more important.
Yeah.
Right? Because the things that we need to tackle in the world at the moment are so huge. You know, that refugee crisis is not going away. We've now trained over 700 people, and that's just a drop in the ocean. There are NGOs working out there. You know, we go out with those NGOs, we work with those NGOs, and they're just scratching at the surface of the problem. But it's important that we scratch the surface of the problem, because if we keep on scratching, those scratches become grooves. Those grooves become paths. Those paths lead to solutions. And that is what we are doing in UWC, and we mustn't forget it. And the thing is that there's a very important message that I can put in this, which is that during your time here, you may feel like you're helpless to do something, because it may feel that it's being left to the adults, or you've got to have more experience behind you to make change and all of these things. You're wrong. You could do it now, and it doesn't need to be a huge change. But if you're all making change,
it's a big effect.
Then it's a big effect. And you guys are needed. It's not that it's a thing really that you can do because you feel like it, and fancy a volunteer. You're needed. And actually the establishment and the motivation to set up the UWC in the first place with people like Kurt Hahn and Lawrence Darvel and even Lord Mountbatten, who's now a kind of a bit of a critical kind of figure, but these guys were visionary in what they wanted to do, and they could identify that you guys, you're never more energetic in your life than when you're
sort of have more energy.
You'll never have it. It just deteriorates. Wait until you get to my age, right? Like this, and it's like every little bit of energy is sort of like, you know, like you've got boundless amounts of energy. Your brains are working faster than they'll ever work in their life. And the thing is that we can delay, right? And if I have any regrets in my life, it's that I've delayed doing things. Right, that I've gone, I'll wait until I'm a bit more experienced, or I'll wait until I know a little bit more, I'll wait until I have a bit more money, or I'll wait until somebody else joins me. And then all of a sudden, your life is just going, it accelerates as you get older.
Like but it doesn't sound like you did not like seize your opportunity.
Yeah, like I mean, like
from what we heard, you did so many different things. And
that built up to that moment.
Yeah, of course, and you have to look at it in that way as well. It was sort of the path was leading that way, and if I hadn't done the other things beforehand, I wouldn't have got to this point. Right, and of course, like regret is a stupid thing to do because there's nothing you can do about it. If I had one, it would be I wish I'd started this project 10 years earlier, because I would have had more energy to do it. Right, that's impatience. Right, I want things to be. The idea for this lifeboat station started in 2014, so nearly 10 years ago, the idea. The establishment of Atlantic Pacific is about 7 years old.
Yeah.
And we want to do more, right?
Yeah.
I want to build 10 boats a year. Actually, I want to build 10 boats a week.
So
Right.
then, what's the future looking then for you? Like what are your next, let's say, 20 years looking like?
So
or
we
where
have-
do you see yourself in 20 years?
We're like, this is breaking news, and maybe this is a good point to finish it. So, it's, like Atlantic Pacific has like 3 kind of endeavors at the moment. One is the search and rescue training stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I'm putting more people in the environment. Globally, drowning is the 3rd biggest killer in the world,
yeah.
right? It's ridiculous the amount of people that
crazy.
drown in the world, right? And it's usually in undeveloping parts of the
Yeah,
world,
of
etc. But the high peak of it at the moment is in the Mediterranean,
Yeah.
right? So we want to do something about that, and we are. And that's through our training camps in the summer here, blah, 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 blah. Working with students here in Atlantic College, week in, week out, going in freezing cold weather and going in beautiful weather, going in rough weather, going in flat, calm weather, getting students into the pool when it's icy cold, and you can see the benefits
Yeah.
for them as individuals, but you can see them how they kind of becoming a useful tool for humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the very clear objective. The other one is to be the innovation side. We want to continue the kind of rib history, right?
Yeah.
We invented the rib in Atlantic College, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We want to be doing more of those kind of things.
Yeah.
Then we have this ocean revival project, right? Because not only do we want to save people from the sea, we want to save the sea itself because it's in a bad state, right?
Yeah.
87% of our ocean is affected by ocean plastics now.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow, so much.
The environment is, if you look at why there are refugees in the Mediterranean, if you track the story back, it's because of environmental and climate change, right? The politics have broken down in their countries because there's starvation and famine, right? Bad management, etc., etc. So we really want to do something about that. And so we're building a workshop in a shipping container here. And it has recycling machines in it. So it has a plastic shredder. It has an injection molding machine. And we want to build boats out of recycled plastic. Right. So we take plastic from the sea and return it in the form of a lifeboat.
So that's wow.
And we're working on that.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where. But what we want to do in the future is that we recognize, talking to you guys and talking to the students that we work with in AP activity at the college, and talking to young people that we work with in London, because we have a training centre in London as well, right, which we built recently, and talking to young people there. A lot of young people are struggling to work out how they can make a difference in the world,
Yeah, it's true.
right? And they're also fixated on the fact that because of the pressures of society and what you've been told is that you got to go to university and you got to get a degree and you got to come out the other end and you got to be a useful member of society in the place of work.
Yeah.
Right? And before you know it, you've been working for Goldman Sachs and you're 55.
Yeah.
Right?
But-
And then you have, and I'm telling you this from experience of my co-years, the people that I went to AC, who all wanted to change the world.
Yeah.
And they all do in their own way.
Yeah.
But I talked to many of them now and they're frustrated that they took so long to get to that point. I'm telling you now, I'm frustrated that it took me so long to get to that point.
You got on
And
pretty
how
early.
do you crack that? Because you talked about like just going with the flow of
Yeah.
just society in a way.
So, yeah, you just have to be ambitious, but you have to do something with that ambition,
So
right?
you have to be proactive about it.
You have to be proactive.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I will say is that, like, it is very hard at your age to make an effect change because you don't have experience and you may not have the wisdom that a number of years put on your shoulders. But you can join organizations that already exist. I remember one of the things that happens, and I've talked to loads of ex-UWC students. They come out of UWC and they're idealistic. They want to do something and they set up their own organization straight away,
Yeah.
right? And that's so hard, right?
Yeah.
Right, and then it collapses after 3 years. They have a breakdown. They are filled with nervous energy, and then they realize they've got to go to university like everyone else does, or they've got to get a job like someone else does.
Yeah.
What we want to do, I would first of all, if I would say to people, join an existing organization as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Right? Go do something for Greenpeace. Go do something for Amnesty International. Go do something for Médecins Sans Frontières. One of these things. Even if it's licking stamps. Right? Even if it's just the grunt work, making tea for people there, because that's all needed. And the other things that are more glamorous and more exciting don't happen if the other things don't happen, right? So
Yeah.
everyone has a vision of being a hero, right? But actually, it's some of the more menial things that an organization needs, like fundraisers or people just rattling cans to get money.
Yeah.
What we want to do is the next thing, and we're just working on this piece of work at the moment, and more that's what will take up my time, is we're going to set up an institution of humanitarian change, right? So all the people that go... Are you all going to university next year, or are you taking a year out?
University.
I'm going to university.
Directly.
I'm not. I'm still deciding what I want to do.
So we hear that story a lot. I'm
Yeah.
still deciding what I want to do,
Yeah.
right? Or I'm taking a year out. Now,
So
a lot
what
of,
would you recommend to those people then? Like,
well, we are trying to set up an organization that
Yeah.
will facilitate something for that.
Oh,
Right.
for that 1 year. Okay.
For that 1 year or for longer, for a university period of time.
Okay.
Right? So that people can come and they actually get the skills to go and work in a situation like what's going on in Gaza at the moment.
yeah.
Right? There's nothing more frustrating than watching the TV and seeing
course,
something like
yeah.
Gaza and going, fuck, yeah, why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can I do to stop this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what can I do to provide some support for the people that are there? The only thing that option you have at the moment is either to stand in London or
Put up a banner,
whatever
yeah.
with a banner saying I don't agree with this,
Yeah.
right? And is that making a difference? No, sadly it isn't. I still think you should do it,
Yeah.
but is it making a difference? I don't think so. Personally, I mean, someone might tell you something different.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely know that, like, the students that have come with us to Japan, I know the students that have worked with us in the summer school, I know that the students have actually suddenly had that sensation, I am actually making a difference. And some of you may have met Theo, who's an ex-student from AC,
Yeah.
and he works with us in he's in the Mediterranean at the moment with the partner organization Sea-Watch as their rib driver and SAR coordinator. So he's showing other people out there how to do it. He's only 22 or 23, right? And it's through working with us that he has found that we have trained over 700 people. Nearly half of those have gone out to volunteer. And they are making big difference. And they're making big change. And it's like we as an organization, and I will finish on this, we work as an organization that day by day is costing us thousands and thousands of pounds, and it's only going to get more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I live, breathe, sleep, bleed, sweat Atlantic Pacific. I don't really think about anything else anymore.
So you ended up dropping out of the university.
Oh yeah, there was
okay.
no way I could do it anymore.
okay.
There was no way. So the university
Yeah.
were very generous. So they gave me 1 year sabbatical, and they gave me 2 years sabbatical, and I said I'm never coming back.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So like, and I you know, like I sacrificed the lifestyle. You know, I had a nice lifestyle in London. I sacrificed that. I moved back down to Wales. I barely have a penny in my pocket. You know, like the organization is not wealthy enough to pay me more than a couple of days a week. My colleague Kate, who also was fool enough to get involved with this project, who was a colleague of mine from the university and also had to quit her job, she only works one day. The reality of it is we work every day. Every day, right? And would I change it? No. But one of the things that I think is when it's tough, and it is really, really tough, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's tough, right? Trying to get money is tough. Trying to convince people that this is a good idea is tough. Getting a lifeboat station to Japan was tough. Running these summer camps, we start organizing the summer camp like a week after we finished it. Right, so it takes almost a year to organize a summer camp. We have a training facility in London that took us years to raise the funding for, and then years to put it together. And it's nightmarish sometimes, and it's painful, and it's stressful, and it's whatever. And then I am reminded of a single story, and there are other stories in our organization that are equally as valuable, but it's a really good one, this one. And it's an ex-AC student called Tom Pugh, who graduated maybe 10 years ago. Very sweet, very innocent. No, less than 10 years, 8 years ago. Really, really gentle soul. And was with us with the boats before we were really well established. But doing stuff with students, and he was involved with the boats, and he was never cocky, he was never arrogant or whatever. He was always listening, and I always thought he was a bit nervous and a bit shy, and he was. He was a bit nervous and a bit shy. But then he came to our summer school and he got involved with this and he got involved with that. And then he went out to volunteer and he was brave enough not to say, I am a rib driver, right? Which is what a lot of people do. They have a little bit of experience. I'm the rib driver, right? Because that's the glamorous role. He went out and he said, I'm not ready to do that. I want to work in the clothes distribution place for when the refugees arrive and you give them nice, clean, dry clothes. So he did that. And one day when he's doing that, he's talking to his colleagues and and everything like this. And suddenly in this tent where they're handing out this stuff, someone starts screaming, and it's a woman, and she's got a baby in her arms, and the baby's not breathing, and panic ensues, and everyone is freaking out. The mother most. And Tom, who's this very quiet, very mild-mannered guy, from one side of the room is looking around for who's going to deal with this. There are loads of volunteers there. He realizes no one is going to do anything, and they're all panicking. And then he thinks, I was trained by Atlantic Pacific to do casualty care. I know what to do. So he galvanized himself, and he walked across the room, and he convinced this woman, please pass me the baby. No. Please pass me the baby. He takes the baby and provides CPR, saves the baby, and passes the baby back. And of course, there's this celebratory atmosphere. The mother is amazed, and he just quietly goes back and gets on with his job. But then when he tells us about it, he's like, I could only do that because you trained me how to do it. We work, we sweat, we bleed, we do all of these things. We beg and steal for money. Would I do it again? Absolutely, because we're not trying to get chalked on the wall. I've saved 10,000 lives. We know we've saved one. We've actually saved many more, but we've actually saved that one. And every single penny we spend, every single sleepless night, all of it is worth it for one. And every time we know that we've done that, we just reset the clock and we go again. It is worth it for one. And if you can remember that that is all you need, that's all you're required to do. And it may not be saving someone's life in that very obvious way of providing them with resuscitation. It may be saving them in some other way. And that's through kindness, consideration, and where we started at the beginning, taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with that, what would you say is your definition of success in life, now that you said all that?
Knowing that you don't end it with regret, which sounds crazy because I think I'm full of regret. Yeah, that's a very, very. That's another philosophical question, okay, isn't it? That could go on forever. And as you can see, I'm not afraid of talking, and I could talk forever on these kind of things. I think you just have to be considerate and aware of other people. When you stop being considerate and aware of other people, then we're all fucked.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you so much, Robin, for
Pleasure.
joining us
That
today.
This was incredible.
Great episode. Thank you very much.
We could go for like 5 hours. I feel like you have
I'm
a
sure
lot to
we
say.
could. Yeah. There's loads of more gory details, but
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really great, I must say. Very impressive story.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Bye bye.
Coolio.